Let me now ask you something. Have you ever seen anyone around you fall sick? Is the person having a cold, a blocked nose, maybe a flu? There is nothing to worry about during this time of the year, like we just said, with the change in weather. During the day, it's warm and sunny, but at night, when the temperatures dip, it becomes cold. People tend to fall sick. And they can always take medications for it, which are easily available that can help you recover from the flu. And when you're feeling under the weather, the last thing you want to do is trek from pharmacy to pharmacy, hunting for basic medicines like cough syrups and antibiotics. But if you are in Europe, the case might be different. Many people across the continent are having to do exactly this. The bloc is facing a drug shortage, and the problem there is particularly acute. You must be thinking, how can this even be possible? The countries in Europe are considered to be developed countries, and such problems are not possible there, in that part of the world. But despite these countries being referred to as developed countries, the bloc is facing a drug shortage. This is not something that has happened at a short notice, though. Since late 2022, EU countries have been reporting serious problems trying to source certain important drugs, with the majority now experiencing shortages. But which medicines are being affected? The bloc is facing a shortage of antibiotics, particularly amoxicillin, which is used to treat respiratory infections. Other classes of drugs, including cough syrup, children's paracetamol, blood pressure medicines, are also scarce. But why exactly is this happening? Why is Europe facing such a crisis? Well, it's a mix of increased demand and reduced supply. Seasonal infections, influenza and respiratory syncytial virus started early and are stronger than usual. There is also an unusual outbreak of throat disease, strep, in children. Experts think the unusually high level of disease activity is linked to weaker immune systems that are no longer familiar with the soup of germs surrounding us in daily life due to the lockdown measures. And this winter, after a couple of quiet years, caught the drug makers rather unprepared. Inflation and the energy crisis also have been weighing on the pharmaceutical companies, affecting the supply. Many European drug makers are saying they are reluctant to expand capacity at a time when the war in Ukraine has pushed up the cost of just about everything, from energy for the factories to cardboard for packaging to aluminium for bottle caps, suggesting more shortages are on the cards. According to 13 European manufacturers and 6 generic drug industry associations and trade groups, many firms are struggling to make enough money to justify making antibiotics at all, let alone increase the production. Moreover, the companies are being undercut by suppliers from Asia. As before launching the tenders, many European governments compare the price of a generic medicine to other markets in the region or to similar drugs at home to set a reference price, which then serves as the benchmark in the negotiations with the suppliers. And then they typically award the contracts to manufacturers offering the lowest price, which then results in further downward pressures on the prices in the subsequent tenders. So that brings me to the immediate question: what is the bloc doing about this, about the shortage of the drugs? Well, the European Medicines Agency and the European Union lawmakers have acknowledged there is a problem. The EMA and the European Commission have met repeatedly with the drug makers and the trade groups since the shortages were first reported in October. But no major action has so far been announced. Meanwhile, the EMA chief medical officer saying that it was fairly unusual to see so many countries reporting shortages of the same products, but forecast demand would ease as warmer weather approaches. In the interim, alternative medicines could be used where amoxicillin is unavailable. The European Commission is scheduled to table revisions to the bloc's pharmaceutical laws in March. It is proposing measures including requiring manufacturers to hold larger reserve supplies and to give early warnings about the shortages. But the executives want Brussels to also back their calls for governments to change the tender and pricing systems. And while Europe tries to solve this crisis of its drug shortage and the poor mismanagement of its supply chain, Is the wait acceptable for the people on the ground, for the Europeans to get access to generic and common medicines? Is it right for the bloc to play with the lives of its own people? And can this become a problem for the rest of the world, where the shortage of medicines becomes troublesome for them? WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.